Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in this video we're picking it up exactly where we left it off in the prior video, which focused on dialogue and investigation. And that was the first part of the playthrough, and now we are entering combat with Aaron, Samuel, and our newly acquired ally Yuma. They're up against a few ghouls as well as some canines, and we're going to go through the understanding of how combat operates inside of Vampire the Masquerade Chapters from Flyos Games. So without further ado, let's go over some of the high-level interest areas for combat, as well as how do we actually win the combat, and then we'll walk through the actual sequence of how combat plays out. It's worth noting that there is a marking on the base of each of these standees, and it has an arrow letting you know which direction that each of these characters are facing. These are also on the miniature bases as well. As with all combat, there's always an advantage to attacking from behind. For this combat, it is not timed, so there's no tracker necessary on the round track. However, for your own purposes, if you wish to track how many rounds it takes, you can certainly do so, but the game will dictate when you need to track something for timing purposes. Next, we're going to draw a card for each one of the individuals in this row, whether enemies or allies, and these combat decks beside them are specific to different group types within the game. So the top one is all about ghouls, the middle one is all about canines or animals, and the bottom one is for allies. So each individual here will be getting a separate card. All cards remain face down at this point in time. Now we're going to focus on creating our active hand, and our active hand comes from a deck of combat cards that we have specific to our character, and that deck, in terms of the number of cards we have access to, is based on the physical attribute, but really tying into the skills underneath of it in athletics, brawl, and weapons. The further up the charts you are on those, the more cards you have access to in your combat deck, and when it comes to creating your active hand, you'll have more options to select from. So as of right now, based in this prototype, I have 3 in athletics, 3 in brawl, and weapon levels. So that's going to determine my current combat deck, along with a base number of cards that every character gets. So each character will be very unique, and Erin, being that she's very good at combat, is going to have a lot more cards than somebody that's really good at dialogue. Now, Erin has more cards beyond what's laid out right here, but I just wanted to focus on 2 of them for now, and then we'll move into the other in a second. This one on the top row is all about athletics, so I've pulled every single athletics card I have for Erin out. I only have 1, and over here on the weapon side of things, I have multiple different weapon cards. Now, if you flip these cards over, they'll let you know whether or not they are a base card, or whether there's a certain level requirement you need to be at in order to have them in your combat deck to select from. And again, you're going to go ahead and reference to ensure you've got everything done correctly. So I'm going to be choosing a total of 5 cards from this pool of cards that I have in combat, and it's based on my physical and my mental added together. So that tells you how many cards you can select to go into combat, and that's considered your active hand. So I have this 1 athletics card, I have all these weapons cards, and on my brawl side of things, I actually have a ton of cards to select from, and I'm going to lay those out right now. And here are all the cards that I have inside my combat deck as they relate to the brawl skill. Again, going back to this, you're going to have skills that are along this column that line up with athletics, brawl, weapons, and stealth, and that's going to be the types of combat cards you're going to be using. So in this case, I do have to pick from the cards you saw in the last shot as well as this shot, and just choose 5 that I want the most. I've chosen the 5 cards that are going to make up my active hand for Erin. I've got Skull Crusher, Armbar, Bite, Guard, and Hook. And you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner of each of these, there is a word which sums up what these cards can be used for, whether it's for a bonus in attack, or it's a mixed card that can be used to be defensive or attack, giving you some options, or a straight-up defensive card. And I think this is a good mix of all the cards that I have. You'll also notice that just above the title of each of these, I chose Brawl for every single one. I think I'm just going to brawl my way through this one rather than focusing on anything to do with athletics or weapons. You'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner of each of these cards that there are some icons specific to dice as well as attack or defense. So basically, you have the type of card that it is. For instance, armbar is a mix. The top row tells you that if you use it for an attack, you're going to get +1 die. And if you use it for defense, on the other row, you get +1 die. And there's variances and differences depending on which cards you're looking at. Of course, if you're using an attack card, the only thing you're going to get is a big-time benefit in attack and nothing on the defensive side. With the active hand established, I now need to pick a single combat card I'm going to use for this round. I'm going to choose something that gives me a mix so I can react defensively if I need to, but also go on the attack if I need to. So the armbar sounds like a good one to start with. The next thing we do is determine who goes first to start off this round of combat now that everybody's situated, and we're going to activate each character as we go along. If there's ever a tie, as you can see, initiative track 4 there has 4 individuals ready to go, but one of them is Aaron. Aaron can go first, which is kind of nice. But as of right now, Yuma, our ally, is going to be the first one to start. Yuma has revealed his AI card, and it states Bite effects suffer +1 damage. That's pretty rough. You'll also notice at the very bottom it states least injured, and how you interpret this versus what's actually on the card itself, as you'll note the same icon exists between both, is he'll attempt to do whatever's on the AI card first, and if he can't do this or there's no easy way to determine this, he then reverts back to his card in terms of who he goes after. So we know Yuma is going to try to make an attack now, but first Yuma needs to move to get into position to make that attack possible. So he has a movement of 3, and based on the AI card it says he's going after the least injured. Nobody's injured yet, so we bypass that, go back to his AI card, and it states the highest initiative. So this is going to be a big time tie across 3 different enemies, so we get to choose in this case. Yuma has decided to go after the Enraged Pitbull because by looking at the card of the Enraged Pitbull, his attack is going to be pretty vicious, and I'd like to get that one off the board. It's the highest enemy attack we have at 3 for a current player count of 1, so let's try and take that Pitbull down as quick as we can. Yuma is going to get the benefit of a +1 damage on top of how much attack that Yuma already has. So Yuma has 3 attack, +1 is going to be 4. Now we need to figure out if that particular enemy AI has a defensive card or not. And the card is an attack card, which is perfect as it notes on it. +2 damage, which would be pretty nasty, but it also has -1 to resistance. So we then go ahead and check to see what the resistance ranking of this thing is, and it's actually 0. So it wouldn't be able to go any lower than 0, which means all the damage that Yuma can pump out is going to be hitting this thing. And currently, based on the player count on the AI card for Yuma just off screen, he's got a 3 in attack, plus the extra one is 4 damage. And that, my friends, is literally it. Yuma just took down the Pitbull perfectly thanks to that thing not having a defensive card. You'll see we ticked up 4, and you'll also note, although it's small to see on camera, it notes 1 or 2 player. This is the level, 4 damage in, where the Enraged Pitbull would be killed off. If we were playing with 3 players, it'd be a higher HP level, and 4 players all the way to the end. And just like that, the combat has evened out. We're now a 3 versus 3 situation thanks to Yuma. And again, you can see the ripple effects of those dialogue options from the prior video now coming through to combat. Because we have him on our side, we were able to take out one of the enemies a bit sooner, and that means a lot. You'll also notice the token for Yuma's moved from one side of the initiative track to the other. That's just to go ahead and track that his turn is finished. We can move down to the next initiative row, which in this case is 4. There's a lot of individuals there, but I'm going to choose to have Aaron go first. The first thing I'm going to have Aaron do is move 4 movement, putting her behind. Thanks to Yuma doing the work to open up a position, I'm able to run through and get behind the target I want to go after, which is the Vicious Doberman. Now I'm going to choose to go ahead and use my armbar card, which is a mix card. I'm going to use it as an attack, and when I do so, I'm going to gain +1 die, which will be nice, as well as an effect that says if +3 damage, -2 on the NPC's next attack. That sounds pretty good. I'm also going to pair this with a dog whistle that I picked up earlier in the scenario. This gives me a +1 die to any skill check of your choice against the type of canine. So I've really got a lot of dice going into this one, but I'm hoping to take the Vicious Doberman out in one foul swoop. So I do have 3 black dice in physical to start. I also get a black die for being behind the enemy. I get a black die for the armbar, and I get a black die for the dog whistle. However, I have to convert one of the dice to a red die based on my hunger. And now we can go ahead and roll and see if we can get the 4 HP we need. But really, because there's a resistance on that individual Doberman of 1, we may need more. Plus, we'll have to flip over its combat card and see if it has even more defense. But first, let's roll and see how this pans out. 6 successes is looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. Let's see how this compares to the combat AI card for the Vicious Doberman. It appears the Vicious Doberman was planning to use its special when it made its next attack, which would have been going after the most injured and adding 2 damage to it. So I'm really glad I took that thing out, and you can see the actual resistance right here for 1 to 2 players is a 1. So 1 off of 6 is 5 going through, and that's 1 beyond what we need to take out the Vicious Doberman. So in the first 2 turns of combat here, Yuma and Aaron are really taking care of business. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with how things are going at this point. We've now cleared out both of the canines. The combat canine, or animals deck I should say, is now removed. I've also removed both canines from the initiative track, and I should have actually removed the canine I took out with Yuma when I made my adjustments on the last kill, but that's okay. There's no gameplay impact there. And now we're gonna move to the next individual in initiative order. We'll move Aaron over to the opposite side of this track, and that is going to be Street Muscle. The Street Muscle individual is right beside Aaron. Let's find out what is going to happen. It is a special 1, which is a dreadful hit. A quick and impactful punch in the throat, plus 1 damage. So who is the Street Muscle going to go after to inflict this special? Well, first we check the card itself. It says most injured up top, but we know nobody's injured just yet on my side of things. The card that was flipped over doesn't have anything that overrides what's on this card. If there was something, this would take precedence and then it would revert to this one. So because neither apply, then we go to the highest initiative, which would be Yuma, and Yuma's actually right here. Even though Aaron's right beside, he's going to go ahead and move towards Yuma and give him a good old punch in the throat. The Street Muscle has an attack value of 2 and gets an additional 1 from the dreadful hit, so that's 3 coming to Yuma. Yuma has a resistance of 2 and does not have a defensive card over here that adds to it, so Yuma will be taking 1 damage. Not bad, not bad at all. Yuma was able to take that throat punch with ease. Next up on the track is our ally, Samuel Anderson. We have an attack card for Samuel Anderson. It's a punch. He's also going to get a +1 initiative on the track, and he's going after the highest initiative character, which is going to be the Street Muscle individual, and he's going to move to try and attack him. Samuel has moved 1 up on the initiative track and is now at 3. He is going to move from his current position up to 2 spaces in order to get to the Street Muscle, and thankfully that's just enough for what he needs to do. It's also worth noting, similar to the main sequence of the game, you can burn an action in order to move an additional 2 hexes if you need to. Samuel is going to attack with a 2, no extra boost here from the card beyond just the initiative change, and there's a resistance of 1 from the Street Muscle, so 1 damage has been placed on it. We're going to need an additional 5 to take it out. The old hobo is going to go ahead and attack and punch. He gets +1 on his initiative, which will boost him from 1 to 2, and he's going to go after the most injured, and currently on our side that's going to be Yuma with 1 hit, and he's got a movement of 2, and that is enough to get him right up against Yuma. The old hobo moves in and makes a 1 damage punch at Yuma, and Yuma has a 2 for resistance, so no damage coming through. And just like that, we've ended the first round of combat. I've put all of the cards we used in the discard piles, new cards for all the NPCs and allies, reset the initiative track, and now we need to select a card for our character. For the next round of combat, I'm going to use a bite card. It's an attack card. I'm hoping to finish them off in this upcoming round. Yuma is activating first, and as you can see, Yuma will be punching, which is going to give him a +1 to initiative. He can't go any higher on the track, so he'll stay right there. He's going to attack at a level of 3, which is pretty good. And he's going to be going up against the individual with the highest initiative, so that would be the Street Muscle. Let's see the combat card for the Street Muscle to see if it impacts defense. Nope, it's going to be an attack right hook, so it's going to be a resistance of 1 up against the 3 attacks, so 2 damage coming to the Street Muscle. All right, we're wearing them down slowly, which is pretty good, and now we're going to have to get Erin involved and maybe see if she can make the final blow count. For Erin, being that she's doing an attack, she's going to be trying to bite. I definitely want to try to take the Street Muscle out before it activates in the next initiative order, as Erin just went, so Street Muscle is coming right behind her. So let's go ahead and have her attack. She is right here. I'm going to move her just 1 space over so she can be behind and take the advantage of a attack from behind. Erin is all geared up to make an attack against the Street Muscle character. I want to make mention of the fact that I do have an item, the Molotov cocktail, that I haven't used yet, and I don't think I will, being that we did such a great job in the first round of the game, but that would have placed fire down, which would have added a whole other dynamic to the particular combat we're in right now. Also, the kitchen knife doesn't have any effect whatsoever, but if you have a weapon as you go through the campaign that gives you an effect, you can pair it with combat cards that actually have the weapon keyword, and there'll be a section on the card where you basically connect them together to use a weapon with a combat card to boost stats and abilities and effects. So I'm not using those in this scenario number 1, but that kind of stuff's going to come in real handy later on. In terms of dice, I've got 3 black dice for the 3 physical I have there. I'm getting an extra die because of the bite, attack, or brawl card. This is also going to come with an effect of -1 hunger if the NPC suffers damage, which is huge because that'll knock off the hunger that I have here. Of course, by biting a victim, I'm actually staving off my hunger, which is great. I get another black die because I'm behind the individual. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make use of blood. And I'm going to choose to do a blood surge. Blood Surge for 1 round is going to allow me to add 1 to my initiative, 1 to an attribute of my choice, and 1 to my movement. The token on my character board is going to help me to remember that this is only going to stick around for 1 round. Now, timing-wise, it might have been better to do a Blood Surge before I actually did my movement, because you gain +1 movement when you do it, but you also gain something that I really need right now when I'm making my attack, and that's an extra boost to an attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into physical, giving me 4 black dice, which essentially adds another black die to the fray, so that's pretty good. But at this point, I now need to do a rouse check, and if I get a skull or a blank side on this die, my hunger is going to increase. But again, I'm offsetting things by using this bite card coming up, so I think I'll be all right. We'll see how it goes. Oh, we got a blank. So we actually ended up failing. Now, this is going to have an impact on the conversion of black dice to red dice. So as of right now, 2 of the black dice that I was going to roll in this upcoming check are going to flip over to red, and this is how I'll be rolling. Of course, those red could have a negative impact. All right, I'm hoping for big things here. I don't want to see any skulls on the red dice because that's going to force a rouse check I really don't want to do. Here we go. Oh, got lucky. I saw those icons for a second. This one is literally just there. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's actually a pretty good roll, but it's not exactly what I wanted in terms of damage. Right now, the resistance of the Street Muscle is 1, and I've done 4 damage, and I only need 1. Oh, I only need 1, 2, 3 to kill him. So that would actually do it, as he doesn't have any defense. So I don't need to use willpower here in order to re-roll just the black dice. And that's another thing to keep in mind, is if you get a roll, you don't like it, as long as you have some blank black dice to work with, or even a single die, you're able to roll all of your black dice if you spend willpower, and there's no limit to how often you can use that willpower in a given turn to keep re-rolling. You just can't re-roll red. So as you can see over here, there's only 1, 2, 3 ticks worth of health left on the Street Muscle. That Street Muscle individual has now been removed and taken out. And because Bite was successful in placing damage on that individual, and even more so by killing it off, we're going to drop our hunger by 1 thanks to that card. And just to show you where that came from again, that's the effect on the bottom. All right, so things are looking pretty good. We're down to the final individual. It's just the old hobo left, and the next individual to go on the initiative track is Samuel Armstrong. Let's flip his card and see what he's doing. Samuel is going to be using his special one, which is at the top here. He's going to go after the highest initiative enemy, which is going to be the old hobo because that's the only one available. And then he's going to use his cane sword. Your cane is in fact a secret sword, which you use as a deadly weapon. -1 initiative to the NPC. That's pretty cool. So it's going to drop the hobo from the second position down to the first position. The only issue with this is this doesn't result in any kind of attack. So instead of actually inflicting any damage here, the old hobo is going to go next anyway, even though it's down here at 1 because, well, moving it from 2 to 1 didn't change things too much this time. So let's see what the old hobo plans to do. He plans to punch, and he's actually going to get an effect that boosts his initiative back up. So he's going from 1 back to a 2 as he struggles on that track to make some traction. He's making an attack against the closest individual, and based on where he is standing, that's going to be Aaron and Yuma, and then it just comes to highest initiative because they're both close. So Yuma will be the target of the attack. The hobo is going to swing with a very weak punch again against Yuma, and Yuma has a higher resistance. We've seen this happen before. Another really bad punch, another really bad swing. Yuma dodges this easily. Now, as you've seen through this, I've been on the offensive almost every single time, but I've played through this off camera as well and needed to be on the defensive sometimes when I didn't start off the combat with such a great hit by Yuma. In this case, Yuma was able to take out an individual, and then shortly after, Aaron was too, which really leveled the playing field. But in prior plays myself off camera, that was not the case, and I needed to use those mixed cards and defensive cards to block some big time hits coming back at me. So this time around on camera, things have panned out differently, and that's going to be the case with this game when you replay it. It's also worth mentioning that you'll notice my pool of cards here in my active hand is slowly disappearing. Well, if you want to bring back a card that you really like, you can. You just have to spend 1 willpower and you can bring all those cards back into your active hand again. You don't have to wait until your hand's depleted, but at the same time, if you're happy with what's already in there, there's no reason to spend the willpower on that. You can use it for rerolls instead. This time, going into the next round, I think Aaron really wants to focus on being aggressive still. We know Yuma's going to go first, then Aaron. Between the two of my heavy hitters, we should be able to take this old hobo down quite easily. I decided to go ahead with the Skull Crusher card, and also this token for the Blood Surge from the last round is now removed as I don't get benefits from that in this coming round. So Aaron goes down the track from 5 back to 4 where she belongs. And we're going to kick things off with Yuma and see what kind of card Yuma has. Hopefully something to put down this last individual. Ooh, a special 1. What is this going to do? It says to move towards the most injured. Well, in this case, enemies-wise, that would not apply as nobody's injured that's currently out there. So highest initiative would be the old hobo being the only enemy out there. And it says leaping in wolf form to the enemy's throat, +2 movement, +2 damage. Yuma currently is standing right here, right next to the hobo, already all set up, so +2 damage on top of what he already has for an attack, which is 3, is a total of 5, going up against a resistance, a pretty heavy resistance on the old hobo of 2, means that 3 is getting through. So the old hobo only has 3 points of damage left. I just went ahead and moved Aaron behind the hobo, and one thing I want to make mention of is that when I'm behind the hobo, instead of gaining an additional black die as I've been doing, but mentioning in a comment on screen, you actually just gain 1 additional damage. So I get a +1 damage just from attacking from behind. I also have my Skull Crusher card here on top of my physical attribute, which is 3 black dice. This is going to give me an additional 2 black dice, so that's pretty good. The fact that I'm behind, as I mentioned, I get +1 damage there. I already have 3 automatic successes in Brawl, so I'm basically coming at this thing with a ton of damage. I don't think this old hobo is going to be able to handle what I'm about to throw at him. But it is worth mentioning that earlier when Aaron was making attacks, I wasn't mentioning, if at all, when calculating damage, the automatic successes from the type of card that I was using. Now remember, all the cards I chose were Brawl, which means I get automatic successes of 3 in them. But most times she just flat out wiped out the individual that she was attacking, because this is what she's strong at, remember. Now if I was using a diplomatic character or someone who's really good with investigations, like Samuel Armstrong, for instance, and I had his skill set, the amount of damage and dice I'd be able to roll would be much less, and I'd be struggling a lot more to make this work. But this is her strong suit. We'll go ahead now and we're going to roll these dice, but first we need to convert at least one of them to a red die thanks to my hunger level, and let's see how this pans out. Again, I've got all kinds of damage coming this way. Oh my goodness. So we did actually end up getting a skull, which is kind of funny because it's the last individual to go on. So a skull is pretty nasty in this case. We have to do a rouse check, so I'll just go ahead and do that right now. We're hoping not to see another skull or a blank. Oh my gosh, so I got a blank, so that is going to tick me up on my hunger track by 1. That's a -1 down here, so it'd be a -1 is now basically triggering my character flaw. So my mental checks would be a -1 at going forward. So I'd only get 1 black die on that one for that attribute, which would be pretty nasty. But overall, I got enough damage. I have the 1 from behind, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is well beyond. Minus the 2 resistance. That is 6 damage straight through. We only needed 3, and that's going to do it. The old hobo is down and out. As you dispatch the last ghoul, you realize that the Sabbat vampire and some of his remaining thugs use the distraction to load some of the dug-up corpses in the van and leave. A quick search of the area reveals a cell phone lying on a pile of dirt. It seems to belong to one of the ghouls. You pick up the phone and put it away. Then you immediately leave the botanical garden. Better not overstay, you're welcome. You survived your first assignment and the Sabbat menace has been dealt with. You even got a mobile phone from one of the Sabbat ghouls. Good thing it isn't locked. You haven't succeeded in learning much about the Sabbat vampire, the vampire whose soul he drained, or the reason why he was digging up corpses in the botanical garden. As far as you know, the park is not some ancient cemetery, or is it? Regardless, based on Yuma's behavior, you suspect that he knew more about the Sabbat vampire than he let on. But you don't think he'd appreciate seeing your faces anytime soon. After a thorough search of the phone's content and SMS messages, you find a series of enigmatic text messages to and from one contact. The contact is only identified as a series of numbers and dots. Further research revealed there were coordinates to some place in the south of the city. You look it up, and it seems to be near the notorious Five Roses factory. You better head there next. The reward for this scenario states to gain 3 XP and to take the We Did It effect card. You can now play Scenario 2, A Ghoul at the Flower Factory. The We Did It effect card is a bonus. It says you survived your first assignment more or less intact. Your confidence is boosted momentarily. Gain a +1 die on your next check and discard after usage. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up the playthrough of scenario number 1. It is definitely worth mentioning, not only did you not see absolutely everything that this scenario has to offer, as there's alternate paths and ways you could have gone about this, there's even different decision making in terms of your combat turns and just usage of the cards that you have, abilities that you have at your disposal. There's a number of different things that are going to come out of your plays within Vampire the Masquerade as you go along. This first scenario is just getting your feet wet around the combat in the game, and there's additional layers that get layered on as you go through. Hopefully this was informative and helps you make an informed decision on this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.